The US government has certified this house as able to survive a direct hit from an EF5 tornado. It cuts energy bills by up to 75%. Insurance runs as much as 90% cheaper. It will stand for centuries with no rot, no pests, and almost no maintenance. And in a country that builds more than 1 million new homes every single year, fewer than 900 of these exist. Not 900,000. 900. So here is the question that should bother you. When something is this safe, this cheap to run, and this durable, why is it almost extinct? If you would rather understand how a thing actually works than just accept the box you were handed, stay with me and consider subscribing, because pulling apart exactly this kind of buried engineering is the whole reason this channel exists. What you are looking at is called a monolithic dome. And before you write it off as some modern eco-fantasy, understand that the dome is not a new idea at all. It is the oldest structural solution our species ever found. Around 19,000 years ago, in what is now Ukraine, builders were bending mammoth tusks and hides into rounded shelters. They had no mathematics and no engineering, just one observation. The curved shape shed the wind and stood when everything flat around it fell down. They were right 17,000 years before anyone poured the first concrete. The Romans took that instinct and turned it into a science. By the 2nd century, they understood that an arch spun 360 degrees around its center makes a shell that carries load in every direction at once. In 125 AD, they used that idea to raise the Pantheon, still the largest unreinforced concrete dome on Earth. Floods, earthquakes, invasions, 2,000 years of them, and it is still standing in Rome today. The same physics shows up in an Inuit igloo, where the curve turns the weight of the snow into pure compression, instead of the bending stress that would crack a flat roof. The shape was never the problem. We just stopped building with it. The modern version arrives in the 1970s, when the South brothers hit on a process that changed everything. Instead of thousands of joints leaking at thousands of seams, they made the shell in one continuous piece. Here is roughly how it goes. You pour a circular concrete ring beam into the ground and bolt a tough fabric membrane, the airform, to it. Giant blowers inflate it into a bubble, and the crew walks in through an airlock. Inside, they spray 3 inches of closed-cell foam onto the fabric, hang steel rebar across the whole curve in 2 directions, then blast on shotcrete, concrete fired at high velocity so it packs denser than the poured kind. When it cures, you have a single, seamless piece of steel-reinforced concrete from the floor to the very top, with a lifespan engineers measure in centuries. And there is one detail in that build that flips conventional home physics on its head. In a normal house, the insulation sits in the walls between you and the weather, and the heavy structure is on the cold outside. In a dome, it is reversed. The insulation wraps the entire shell on the outside, which leaves hundreds of tons of concrete sitting on the warm inside, behind the thermal barrier with you. So once you heat or cool that air, the concrete soaks the energy up and bleeds it back out slowly for hours. The building becomes its own thermal battery. I will be honest, that is the part that made me stop and reread, because it is so simple and so obviously better that you start to wonder how we ever talked ourselves out of it. Then there is what happens when nature comes for it. The curve sends every force, snow, wind, an earthquake, straight down into the foundation as compression. There are no corners for the wind to grab, no flat wall for pressure to build against. A 300-mile-an-hour gust throws about 400 pounds against every square foot of a flat wall. But it just slides around a dome. To earn that federal storm rating, a shelter has to take a 15-pound piece of lumber fired at 100 miles an hour. It punches clean through a brick veneer wall. Against a dome shell, it leaves a scuff. In 2003, a tornado went directly over a dome home in Polk County, Missouri, and threw a nearly finished conventional house a quarter-mile away into the trees. The dome lost a single piece of window trim. One in Pensacola rode out 3 hurricanes in one season, and a dome government building in Iraq took a direct hit from a 5,000-pound bomb, lost its interior, and stayed standing. If a house that shrugs off a 5,000-pound bomb is the kind of thing you did not know existed, that is exactly the gap this channel goes looking for, and a quick subscribe is the only signal that tells the algorithm to keep handing you more of them. Now to the part that actually matters. The numbers off the disaster record are almost the boring part. In Mesa, Arizona, where it stays above 100 degrees for 107 days a year, a 3,000-square-foot dome posted a peak summer electric bill of $199, against $400 to $600 for a normal house the same size. A family in Virginia ran their 2,600-square-foot dome for $900 a year, less than some people pay to heat a one-bedroom apartment. A school district in Wisconsin built 5 domes for $9 million and saved an estimated $8 million against conventional construction before the first power bill ever showed up. So we have a structure that is safer, cheaper to run, and longer lasting than the wooden box almost all of us live in, which makes the real question sharper, not softer. Why are there only 900? The answer comes down to 2 things, and neither one is a villain in a boardroom. The first is the mortgage. In America, a lender will not approve one without an appraisal, and an appraisal needs 3 comparable homes nearby that sold in the last year. That rule was written for a country of rectangular wooden boxes. Dome owners, having built something cheap to run that will outlast them, almost never sell. So there are no recent dome sales to compare against. No comparables, no appraised value. No value, no mortgage. No mortgage, fewer buyers, which means fewer domes, which means even fewer comparables. The thing strangles itself in a loop. The second is zoning. Plenty of towns require a minimum roof pitch to keep the neighborhood looking uniform, and a dome runs from vertical at the base to flat at the top. So it technically fails that rule at every point on its surface. And in a state like California, getting a permit for a thin concrete shell an inspector has never seen can run past $40,000 in engineering review before a single yard of concrete is poured. Nobody banned the roundhouse. The system was simply built around the profitable square one and never made room for anything else. Picture the gap that leaves us in. There are close to 4,000 of these shells worldwide, across 49 states and 53 countries, proven against bombs and hurricanes and decades of brutal sun, built off a patent that is now 50 years old and physics that is 2000. And the machine that decides what gets financed looked at all of it and decided that because the house is round, it is too unusual to lend against. So here is what I will leave you with. Is the monolithic dome a genuinely better way to live that our own paperwork has quietly suffocated? Or is it a niche curiosity that deserves to stay rare, no matter how well it performs in a storm? Pick a side and argue it below, because I honestly land somewhere in the middle, and if you want a $15 trick that makes an ordinary window outperform triple glazing, that is the one I would watch next. Come find it with me.